Celebrate. International Coaching Week, a worldwide celebration and an opportunity to learn, grow, and experience professional coaching. During International Coaching Week, we encourage individuals and organizations all over the world to understand, explore, test, and discover the possibilities coaching provides. Join us for hundreds of events in dozens of languages all over the world.
Agora eu vejo todos aqui. Então, olá, tudo bem? Olá a todos, todas, sejam bem-vindos. Em nome da ICF, desejamos dar as boas-vindas para vocês. Para quem não me conhece, eu sou José Roberto, eu sou membro da atual diretoria da ICF Brasil. A ICF é a maior associação global, presente em mais de 100 países, né? Hoje conta com mais de 50 mil associados em torno do mundo, né? Essa semana ela está acontecendo mais de 1000 eventos em mais de 20 idiomas, né? Então nós estamos aqui com a nossa equipe para fazer um bom trabalho para vocês. Estou eu, a Clélia, a Raquel, que já agradeço já de antemão. Quero agradecer também os nossos líderes regionais que estão aqui, os nossos comitês, o nosso conselho deliberativo, né? Então, eu queria apresentar os nossos painelistas, a Iaci e o Ed, né? Então, a Iaci é CEO da IMR Ericsson Coaching Brasil, Team Coaching, mentora, supervisora, PCC, né? Com mais de 30 anos de carreira executiva, a Iaci decidiu empreender e escolheu o coaching como a sua estrada principal, a partir da qual desenvolve há 15 anos diversos trabalhos, apoiando o desenvolvimento de organizações que desejam essa mudança cultural de times que buscam excelência das relações e das realizações individuais que buscam a maestria em seus projetos pessoais e profissionais. A Iaci é psicóloga e socióloga pela PUC de São Paulo. O Ed tem carreira internacional, já foi CEO de empresas na Irlanda, França, Índia, Estados Unidos e Turquia, antes de mudar sua carreira para a área do desenvolvimento humano com sua própria empresa de consultoria e coaching. Ed também é responsável pela Ericsson Coaching da Irlanda. Como palestrante, já realizou alguns trabalhos TED Talks. Então, agora eu passo a palavra aqui para a Iaci, que vai fazer esse meio de campo junto com o Ed. Sejam bem-vindos.
Muito obrigada. Boa tarde a todos. Obrigada novamente por estarem aqui conosco, comigo e Ed. Já peço desculpas que eu estou com influenza e eu posso tossir de vez em quando. É um prazer estar como co-patrocinadora desse evento. Eu acho que desde que começou a International Coaching Week, eu não perdi nenhuma. Tenho muito orgulho também de ser membro fundadora da ICF Brasil. Então, eu estou me sentindo em casa aqui. Muito obrigada pelo convite. E hoje uma grande alegria estar com o Ed aqui conosco. Ed é uma pessoa que tem, como vocês viram, uma experiência muito grande como executivo. Eu represento o Ericsson International no Brasil e ele na Irlanda. E formamos uma comunidade muito internacional e muito próxima ao mesmo tempo. Yeah. Estivemos até a semana retrasada juntos, trabalhando na atualização e na atualização dos nossos conteúdos, dos nossos programas. Então, estivemos juntos. E lá eu tive a oportunidade de convidar o Ed para estar aqui. E ele veio para estar no SF Brasil. Não da Irlanda e não da Turquia, onde ele mora. Ele vai falar. E discutindo sobre um tema que seria mais provocativo trazer para vocês. Queríamos alguma coisa fora do padrão. E Ed brilhantemente veio com esta reflexão que ele vem fazendo há algum tempo. E, na verdade, ele veio praticando também esse posicionamento. Que diz respeito à normalidade e à anormalidade. O que isso tem a ver com o coaching? Então, eu queria convidar Ed para começar a sua apresentação, fazer sua própria apresentação. É um prazer tê-lo aqui. E nós vamos, durante a apresentação do Ed, eventualmente interagir nós dois. E, às vezes, pedir para que vocês entrem também na dança. Ok, Ed.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll share my screen, I think, right, first.
Presentation.
First of all, I want to say what a great pleasure it is for me to be here today. I'm so happy that IASI has invited me, and when I look at the group that's here today, I feel that I'm in the presence of some incredible people with experience. I can see by your faces that this is who you are, which is a little bit intimidating, but I will get over it. But it's wonderful to be here. It's I came into coaching back in 2016, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. But before going in there, if I may also say thank you to everyone from the ICF in Brazil for accepting me in here today as well. And also to say thank you to Daniel, because being Irish, it's not easy to understand Irish people. And when we speak, it's even more difficult. So Daniel's translation is very valuable for me. So thank you very much, Daniel. As Yassi was saying to you, that I am based in Turkey and I'm here since 1996. And I think that, and thank you for the introduction as well, but let me explain a few things about how I got to Turkey, because I think it's actually quite relevant in how I've become a coach and how I've come to be the partner for Ericsson Coaching in Ireland. And I've a quick slide to show you my path in terms of my career through pictures. And basically, and probably unsurprisingly, being Irish, I worked for a long time in the drinks industry in terms of Jameson whiskey. It was my first job almost out of school, and I started at the bottom of the rung, and in the office, which looks like a little bit like this one here in the top left. At a time, believe it or not, when there was no internet. Anybody remember a time when there was no internet? I used to deliver envelopes to people's desks. I used to bring newspapers to the general manager's office. I used to do all these things. So that was way back in the mid 70s. And I moved my career then into logistics side, and was shipping Jameson whiskey around the world. And then I moved into sales and worked in the duty-free area. And then that took me into London, and where I worked as a business development manager there. And after a while, Pernod Ricard, the French multinational company, had bought Jemison, and that gave me an opportunity to move abroad. And I was taken, the opportunity came for me, the offer came to me to go to India to do a startup company for them in India. And that was quite intimidating. So I stayed and ran the organization. I built it up and I ran it for 2 or 3 years. And that took me then to Turkey. And again, I did a similar job, set up a joint venture there. And when I left that business, my next posting was to Mexico, but I had fallen in love with a Turkish girl. And I stayed on and decided to run my own business, which was in the bar business. And I ran that for about 2 or 3 years. Then I met a guy called Gurhan, who made 24-karat gold handmade jewelry. He was based in New York and his wife was Australian. And we were making jewelry that was worn by the likes of Angelina Jolie and Hillary Clinton, Queen Rani of Jordan. And apart from doing all that work for them, I was also in charge of doing business development. So it took me to Russia. It also took me to China, where I did a startup operation in terms of silverware in China. And then eventually I left that organization to set up my own business. I guess I got Iyasi's bug to be an entrepreneur on my own and chose a similar path. And my path was that because I'd seen in my life as GM, I'd seen a lot of toxic management, the kind of toxic management that destroys people in their job, that destroys people's home lives, and that I wanted to work on leadership development, mostly based on value-based leadership. And I believe that very closely linked with that kind of training, you need to bring in coaching, because only coaching will ensure that the behavior that you really desire is going to happen, because everybody knows that over 70% of what people learn in a 2-day workshop, they forget about it within 2 days. It's all gone. But coaching has the ability to build and to secure the learning to the workshop and to help behavior to change. So this was my mission whereas Ericsson's mission would be to change the world one conversation at a time, our mission in Global Mindworks was to change the world one leader at a time. Because if you can change leaders through developing coaching cultures and a caring organization, then I believe that we can have a happier world before us and something that can be sustained into the future. So during that time, I went to Canada and trained to become an Ericsson coach under Marilyn Atkinson and her team there. And then when I was there, the entrepreneurial spirit kicked in, because I realized that Ericsson was not in Ireland. And I spoke with Marilyn, and over a year, I managed to convince her to give me the partnership for Ireland. It was back in 2017. And I work with a lot of organizations in Ireland, in the likes of SAP, etc., and also individuals wanting to become life coaches and set their own business up. But all that time, the intention was I was going to go back to Ireland from Turkey. In 2019, my father took ill and I took him to Turkey to look after him. COVID kicked in 2020, and that put the stop on moving back to Ireland. So I'm very happy where I am. We do a lot of our programs online. And Ericsson in Ireland is growing, coaching in Ireland is growing, and there's far more coaching organizations in Ireland than what there were when I started. Unfortunately, not all of them are ICF accredited, which is a problem, but it is going the right direction, the awareness of coaching. So that's me in Ireland, and now I'm still in Turkey. I think that the other side of me is that I grew up in, let me just go back to that. My background, my personal background is that I grew up in a very safe and secure Irish Catholic family, and we were expected to follow a particular secure and safe path. And we were a family of 4 siblings. Both my parents had left school when they were 15. When I came to Turkey, I married a fantastic Turkish lady. From my children, I got 2 adopted children in Ireland from my first marriage and 2 grandchildren. So this is my abnormal life, as it were. And the reason that I say that my life is abnormal is because of the background that I grew up in. And that social background it's not expected that you get exposed to a lot as rich in experience and self-development as what I've had. And so therefore it's abnormal. And my personal abnormality is that I'm really the black sheep of the family, because when something comes to me and I feel good about it, I normally grasp it, embrace the moment, and risk comes back into the background. And this is my abnormality compared to everybody else who seems to think that they plan things and develop things and whatever. I dive in. And sometimes I feel I live my life wearing a blindfold. I just jump in and see what comes. And some people admire that sometimes in me, and sometimes they think I'm mad as well. So it's really, I'd like to kind of put this back to everyone here today. If I was to ask you what is your abnormality that people admire about you, let's say if I asked your best friend, what would he or she say to me that this is what they like about you, this is the abnormality that they like about you? And if you wouldn't mind, I'd ask you to take that moment, and if you're comfortable to do so, obviously share it in the chat, but if not, write it down, just keep it separately, because as I go through my chat today, kind of refer to your thought, your abnormality, and how you've been challenged by it, because I'd like you to use that as your reference point as well. So and just see if I have any abnormalities coming up in the chat. None so far. People want to keep their abnormality to themselves, right? For a moment. Okay. I'm assuming that you've got something in your mind. Okay. So let's talk about abnormality. And I'm going to start by talking about a very special little Turkish girl, and her name is Aisha. And I was invited, the topic of abnormality has really intrigued me for quite a while, as Yassi was saying. And I was invited to speak about abnormality in a TEDx talk in Istanbul one time, a number of years ago. And Aisha is the daughter of one of my best friends in Turkey. She was age 15 at the time. Lovely, sparky girl, full of energy and great fun, as you can see. And we went to dinner about 2 weeks before the event I was going to speak at. And Aisha's parents were there, and Aisha was there. And Aisha and I would always play jokes on each other. And so the conversation came to my talk. And Aisha was very excited to hear what I'd be talking about. So she asked me about it, and I told her that the topic was going to be abnormality. Now, remember, she's 15 years old. Her eyes opened wide with real curiosity. And she said, "Uncle Eddie, what will you be talking about?" So I said that as the topic is abnormality, and you, Aisha, are not normal at all, so I'm going to talk about you. So I started laughing, thinking that I played a great joke, okay? And she was quiet for a moment, and I was a bit worried because I thought I might have upset her. And her expression changed from curiosity to deep consideration. Then she immediately answered with a serious face and said, "You know, Uncle Eddie, you are not insulting me by calling me abnormal." And I was speechless. How amazing is it that this girl, age 15, was declaring that she knows that she's abnormal, that she's different from the crowd, and is proud of it. She was not hiding it. So this was my introduction to abnormality in a different framework when I was introduced to Aisha. So when we talk about abnormality, whoops, look at that, my finger moving too fast. When I talk about abnormality, we should understand what normality is first. And I think that's the right place to start, right? And normality in terms of human interaction and behavior. So normality for us as an individual would be behavior that people see in us as being normal. In other words, we're consistent, and we're constantly behaving or doing things in a certain way. So we do the same thing all the time. So it's normal. Oh yeah, that's Eddie. That's him. All right, that's him being him. Normality is also when our behavior conforms to the most common behavior that are set by social norms in society. You're going to hear me talk a lot about social norms, or in the environment that we're guided by. So, for example, I took the liberty of checking out on Brazilian society, and I understand that if you're invited for dinner, the social norm is that you can arrive 30 minutes late for dinner. I don't know if that's true or not, but I found it on Google. And I see a parallel with Irish culture. We're normally about 45 minutes late. But in Germany, of course, this would be rude. But this is normality. So it's normal for people to arrive 30 minutes late. So is normality a good thing? I'm curious to know what you think off the top of your head. Is it a good thing or not a good thing? Those of you who think it's a good thing, perhaps give a thumbs up in the chat. Let me check on my other screen in the chat. Is it a good thing? Is normality good? It's going to come in Portuguese, right? Okay. All right. So if you think it's normal, then okay. But experts will tell you that mankind needs social order or norms, or else you're going to have no order in the world. You're going to have chaos. But what does social order look like, and how is it formed? It's formed on the basis of a series of values that we hold at this particular time. And those values are backed up by moral standards and ethics and aesthetic values that exist today or at the time that you might be talking about in the past. So it's the moral standards and ethics and aesthetic values of the time in question. And how does it look? It means that if you have social norms, well, then there's very little deviance away from the accepted behavior norms. There's nothing causing high distress to the status quo. Social communications and interactions are according to accepted social terms. We're doing nothing that's going to frighten or disturb people. And that's what it looks like. How does that shape us as individuals? Well, let me tell you that there are some examples that we all can pull on. So, for example, if you think of a time when you changed the way you wanted to act in public because you felt that you had to behave in a certain way, or you would face rejection by people or even be laughed at. Make sense? Right? For example, when another case might be, you might be a member of a project team, a junior member of a project team, and you keep quiet in a meeting because you're expected to keep quiet in a meeting because other senior managers are dominating it. So there's a code of behavior, there's a social norm in there. Or we'll all remember a time perhaps when you didn't act the way people expected you to behave. Or you do something that people didn't expect you to behave, to do. So maybe you took a complete U-turn in your career direction that was against the desires of your parents at the time, or the advice of teachers or advisors. So, and you can remember what the reaction was. Or you might think of how you yourself expect others to act. I've been in circumstances in Ireland where I hear people talk about mature people, and somebody will say, "Oh, would you look at him? Wouldn't you think that he would act his age? Who does he think he is?" So we expect people to how we change our behavior into social norms. One of the ones that gets me these days is that we've now come to the realization that it's okay for a boss to cry, believe it or not. Before it wasn't, but sometimes bosses can show vulnerability. And that social norm has changed. But these are just some of the examples that affect your personal behavior. How does it shape our lives? See about how it shapes our behavior. But how about our lives? Now, you'd be curious to know and to hear that Cornell University in America carried out research that was reported about 5 to 7 years ago about the top 50 the top concerns of people aged in their 50s, right? And let me just, yeah. And from this research, Cornell found that we actually fall into two different categories. One is called the ought to self, and the other is called the ideal self. Now, we're all coaches here today, and we often see our clients discover in a coaching session with them that they're actually following paths that are not theirs because these paths don't actually belong to them. They are conditioned and shaped and formed by social norms. We live in a world in which we're told that we'll have a great life if we follow a set of rules. So when we follow a set of rules laid out by the social norms in our society, of wherever you live, and you behave according to them, then you're going to have a great and a happy life. Now, I don't know what the social norms in Brazil are, but in Ireland, when I was leaving my college, the norms for me, for the ought to me, would be I ought to go to school. I ought to go to university. I ought to get a job. I ought to get married. I ought to marry a Catholic. I ought to have children. I ought to be a good citizen. And I ought to pay my bills and my taxes. So if I do all of this, then I'm told that I will live a happy and fulfilled life. Okay? Now, the important point here is that our individual behavior then becomes the one that conforms to the common behavior in society. We are behaving according to social norms, and so we become normalized. So to that extent, yes, there is happiness in living out the ought to part of you. But the shocking side of the findings in the Cornell University was that 76% of the people surveyed said that their biggest regret is in not fulfilling their ideal self. I found this to be a shockingly high percentage, 76% not fulfilling their ideal self. So is that normal, do you think? Is it normal that we should accept 76% not live, that 76% of us are not living our ideal self? If you say yes, then we were saying that it's normal to have this regret. There were other regrets apart from not living your ideal self. And I'm just wondering, before I show the slide, there's about 7 of them on. What do you think some of the regrets would be of people in their 50s? You can say it in, because we have simultaneous translation. What would be a regret that somebody in their 50s might have? And let's see how many actually appear on the other findings. Anybody like to suggest one? A regret that somebody in their 50s might have. We have a very quiet group, Yasi, today. Nobody coming forward, no? Okay. Well, then let me show the slide for you. Some of the others were ending relationships with those that we love. But for some reason you break away from someone that you love, not necessarily your husband or your wife or whatever, but somebody that you might have been close to as a friend and you wish you hadn't done. Maybe you had an argument with them and you didn't resolve it. Maybe you could have done it with a coach at the time to resolve those conflicts. Not being more adventurous, playing it safe all the time, worrying about other people's opinions. We shape the way we behave and the things that we do because we're worried about other people's opinions. Working too much. Now, there's one that's regular, comes up to the work-life balance all the time. Not standing up for yourself in terms of, for interpretation on not standing up, not defending yourself, not defending other people. And the other there was acting your age. In other words, letting go of the child inside them, that they felt that they should have held on to the child inside them a little bit longer. I know that not many of you here are in your 50s, but those of you who are might be recognizing some of these issues creeping into your life, even at this stage. I don't know how many there might be. Anybody like to put a thumbs up or to say how many you have, or that some of these issues apply to you? Maybe there's one issue, maybe two issues. Yeah. Thank you, Jose. I can't see the rest of the body on the screen because I know there's over 70 there, but I'm sure there must be a few thumbs up there. So we'll probably find that we've probably coached a number of people. A number of our own clients have been coaching some of these topics themselves. But while all that is going on, what happens with the ideal self? The one that 76% of us say that is not being fulfilled. What does he or she want? Well, as you can imagine, our priorities are conditioned by the social norms that the dreams and ambitions of the ideal self become secondary. We're focusing completely on living the ought-to self. All our time and effort goes into the ought-to self. So any of the priorities that the ideal self has, they fall to the back. The more time and resources we spend on fulfilling the ought-to, the less time there is for the ideal self to show. And it gets pushed back to the end of the queue. There's never enough time. So when it comes to dreams and aspirations, it's normal for people to meet the requirements of our social norms first and look after our ideal self second. And life drifts by. And at the end, these people are in their 50s and people in their 60s. We talk about what your legacy is going to be when you reach old age. What are your regrets going to be? What you wish that you could have done? And all these relating to this particular period in life. Perhaps you felt that you had a talent for singing. I got one guy, one of our alumni in Ireland. He had an ambition to sing in a choir, and his friend said, "Oh no, sure you don't have the talent. Don't do any of this." And he actually worked in SAP, and when he became an alumni with us, and he was doing his training, he was coached on this, and he actually did it, and he's now a leading tenor in a choir in Dublin. And when he tells his story, it's full of passion. You know, and he's so grateful for coaching for what it had done for him. Perhaps you have an ambition to climb a mountain, Everest or whoever. My personal ambition was to climb Kilimanjaro in Kenya, but I delayed it because I had other priorities in my to life. And now I can't because I've had an unsuccessful operation on my knee, and I can't climb anymore. But I put the whole ambition back. Now what?
Eddie?
Yes?
Deixe-me interromper.
Sure.
Tem muitas pessoas compartilhando as coisas das quais se arrependem. Aqui eu queria ler algumas para vocês. Então, uma pessoa, assim como eu, se arrepende de não ter dado continuidade aos estudos de música, de um instrumento. Uma pessoa muito corajosa diz não ter vivido uma vida autêntica. Vou dar um tempo para o Daniel traduzir. Outra pessoa que eu compartilho também, me arrependo de não ter sido aventureiro, não ter saltado de paraquedas, ter abandonado a dança, uma lista grande de coisas das quais me arrependo, não ter completado minha criação artística, não ter feito algumas viagens importantes, enfim, tem uma lista grande aqui de coisas que as pessoas compartilharam com você, conosco, das quais se arrependem.
Absolutely wonderful. And thank you so much, everyone who's shared. And please read each other's submissions there, because it really is creating an amazing awareness for us all. I resonated with a couple that Yassi was calling out there in particular about authenticity. And again, how often in a business environment have we seen people not being authentic, not being their real selves? It is impossible to be one person in an office, a manager in an office, be a different person at home. It's still the same set of values, still the same set of standards that you need to live by. But and I find in my own experience, I work with a lot of leaders. I encourage them to be their authentic selves, and they come to me looking for coaching on how to be their authentic selves. How do they deal with toxic environments when they're dealing with toxicity in their environments? And then we talk about how they can influence and become role models of authenticity in their workplace and make it a better workplace to live. I love the other comment, particularly on the creative side, and I'm going to talk about that side in a second as well, because that's one of the main areas that people do regret. And my Aisha's father, his name is Biro, he's my best man at my wedding, and he's taken up piano, right? And he's 58, he's taken up piano. So, I mean, it's this lack of, he's put aside their creative side because we don't have time, because we're caught up in the ought to responsibilities. So thank you again very much for sharing. Thank you for the interruption. Yes, very, very much appreciated. The going back on the Cornell, there was actually three main messages that Cornell came out with in terms of the study. And the first one was that people come to a point in their lives when they seek their individuality, when they're in search of happiness. So think of the people who come to you as a client saying, I'm not very happy, and I don't know how, I don't know why, and whatever. And then you move into coaching. But this seeking of their individuality in search of happiness, they feel is something, they're living somebody else's life, not their own. And sadly, this point is normally arrives later on in life, because we tend not to be aware of the existence of the ideal self until much later, because we're shaped from the day we're born. So therefore, so this ideal self doesn't come to the fore until much, much later. And we're in a full flow, satisfying the ought to self. And in Irish society, perhaps, I'm not sure in Brazil, but it then comes to, you need to get a big car, you need to have a big house, you need to have 2 holidays a year. Oh. So the second message is that people want to live fulfilling lives without regrets. And this is when we fulfill our ideal lives without regret, it means that we've lived our lives with nothing left out, that we've done those piano lessons, that we've been authentic, we've affected lives in a good way, so that when people look to us as role models, they see us as living our true lives and being true to ourselves. The last message that came out was that to live a life of happiness, people believe that they need to change their normal behaviors. Again, we're back into normality. And this is the aha moment that people realize that something must shift. The question that we need to ask as coaches is, what specifically needs to shift. And this is where abnormality begins to raise its head in our coaching conversations, and it becomes more demanding. And our coachees start to welcome this new part of themselves that they felt that they've been putting down for a while, and they begin to explore who that person is. So this is a long lost friend that has been part of them for their lives. So they come to the coach, like I say, and they say, I don't feel fulfilled, but I don't know why, or I have everything I need. I have my house, my car, my great wife, and my lovely kids. Why am I not happy? So again, they come back and they find that some of the behaviors that they prefer to do are not theirs, but they're shaped by the society norms. And they're uncomfortable with them because they perhaps even conflict with their own core values. So as coaches, we support people to be the best they can be at home and in the workplace and in life. And in this work, we need to support our clients to become aware of their ideal selves. How they respond to this awareness is not up to us to influence, but to support them in becoming aware of their ideal self. I mentioned earlier about the shaping of how we're shaped from an early age. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Ken Robinson, but first of all, to say that when we ask people to embrace the awareness of their abnormality, it's not easy for them to do, and we're trying to they are moving, they're shifting from their comfort zone of existing norms, and then they're trying to learn something new, or they're trying to attempt something new. So it's not easy for our clients to work in that way, and it's important that we support them. The comment from Ken Livingstone, Ken Livingstone was a British author. He was a public speaker and an international advisor on education to the government in Britain. He worked with non-profit organizations, but his focus was mainly on education. And he actually gave 3 TED Talks on the importance of creativity in education. It's relevant to our topic today. And back in I think it was back in 2017 or 2018, he had 80 million views of these talks. In fact, his main talk was called Do Schools Kill Creativity? Really powerful. And it was the most watched TED Talk of all time. It had 66 million views. And of course, it was shown on YouTube as well. And it was translated into about 62 languages. So I think it must be in Portuguese as well. And he believed that we are educating people out of their creative capacities. Go back to one of our colleagues in the group today that, we regret not following up on our creative desires in life because we tend to be educated out of them and put them aside. So we don't grow into creativity. Instead, we grow out of it. We get educated out of it. It was a very strong statement. And he advocated a major overhaul in the education system. And basically said that social norms encourage conformity. Everybody has to do the same, similar to what I was saying before, like the ought to person. So social norms encourage conformity, they encourage compliance, they encourage standardization, and you can apply those 3 things to abnormality. When you see how social norms approach abnormality coming into them, you see that the social norms resist any diversity or individuality that makes the social norm look uncomfortable, or it becomes an unacceptable challenge. Any genuine curiosity, I would say, about anything that looks abnormal is often discouraged, and it's replaced with a kind of a comfort zone that's really found in ignorance. I don't know about this, I don't trust it, so I'm not going to, that person's not behaving properly, and they ignore it. And we don't have the curiosity to ask a person why they are thinking or saying something, are in different ways to what we expect. You know, people don't say, "Hey, excuse me, you just said something there. I'm curious. Can you tell me what you mean?" In Ireland, we're too polite. We don't ask these questions, so therefore the comment goes by without questioning, because it's not normal. Let's let it go by. And then what we do is if we do have to do it, we test anything that looks strange or abnormal against the standards of the existing norms, and we look for assurances whether something strange behavior is okay, and if it's okay for us to accept it. Now, it's very difficult. So abnormality in our behavior makes people raise eyebrows. They start to question and they wonder about things. So people who want to resist that abnormality need assurances that the way you're behaving or what you're doing is okay, but also from the person who wants to show something different, to be different, seeks assurances that they're going to be accepted. And the way that this is handled in society is that we have role models of abnormality. I think a good way to look at it would be look at the Oscars, the biopics that have won so many awards in the Oscars, such as Schindler and Schindler's List, Braveheart, about William Wallace, Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, are all great examples, and these are heroes. The common theme in all of these great people who challenged the social norms and disrupted them, they were abnormal people. They were all really great people who were different from the crowd. They were abnormal from everything that they lived in, but they opened up an awareness in others about what those other people wanted as well. So society changed. Like Schindler had a big effect in terms of the saving of the Jews from death. William Wallace sparked the independence of Scotland. Nelson Mandela stopped apartheid. Mahatma Gandhi created an ideology of peaceful protest that is consistently referred to even until today. So these abnormal people who stood up and people went, "Ooh, what are they on about?" They actually made an effect on the world. Our coaching clients might not be the next Schindler, might not be the next Gandhi, but they each have an individual abnormality and ability to create a revolution in their own lives and among the people that they socialize with. And that revolution in their own lives can have a butterfly effect into their social sphere and even beyond. So go back into the example that Yassi called out about somebody saying, "I wish I could be more authentic." And the people who want to be authentic managers in the workplace, if you begin to work in this way, you're looked as being abnormal. How could this person show vulnerability? We're all meant to be tough and strong. And that person shows vulnerability, shows the basis of servant leadership, and that begins to raise the level of culture in the organization, and therefore everything grows, and we have that huge effect. So an individual might not be a Gandhi or a Schindler, but can have that amazing effect in his or her own world. So when our coachees become aware of the abnormality and take courage in welcoming it and working on it, then great things can happen. I was wondering when I was preparing for today who would be my great example, and I go back to the 2019 Oscar Awards, and the awards were dominated by Bohemian Rhapsody. I don't know if you remember Bohemian Rhapsody. It was, or if you've seen it. For those of you who don't know about it, it's a biopic about the life of the rock star Freddie Mercury. And he was the lead singer of a band called Queen. And the movie was nominated for 5 Oscars and it won all 5. It was an incredible movie. And Queen was one of the most successful rock bands in the world, sold over 200 million records. And 6 million of those record sales were from a song called Bohemian Rhapsody. And so the movie was called after the song. And that song remained in the number 1 place in the charts in the UK for about 14 or 15 weeks swimming. And it became the top selling #1 in the UK of all time. It's still there. And Freddie Mercury is the guy who wrote Bohemian Rhapsody. And what's special about the song, I don't know how many of you would be musicians or would have that deep knowledge of music, but for example, this song lasts a full 6 minutes. And as you know, most songs last 3 minutes or 3.5 minutes, so unusual. It includes a lot of sections without a chorus, didn't put in chorus. Now, it's a combination. There's an intro segment, there's a ballad segment, there's an operatic passage segment, there's a hard rock segment, and there's what they call a reflective coda. Now, I had to look this up. The reflective coda is like, if you remember the Beatles song, Hey Jude, and comes to the end of the song, Hey Jude, Hey Jude, Hey Jude. This is what they call a reflective coda. But it had all these elements in it. It was pure genius. And Freddie Mercury wrote it. So Freddie himself was also very abnormal. And so when you compare Freddie with the definition of normality at the time, Freddie was homosexual at a time when homosexuality was a topic to be avoided. He looked extremely strange. He had 4 extra back teeth, which pushed his front teeth forward. And he said that this is what helped him to give him his 4-octave range. His behavior was eccentric. He would dance around the stage in the most ridiculous and really daring costumes. Again, the picture of him here. Yeah. And he lives according to his abnormality. So we got to see and appreciate the amazing creativity of this guy. One of the most memorable statements that Freddie made was that he once said that he would not be a rock star, he would be a legend. And he died over 30 years ago, and he became a legend, and his abnormality is a beacon today. And in my belief, I believe that Freddie is a great example of living your ideal self. As a result of that, the world got to listen to some of the most amazing rock music, saw amazing performances, he energized millions, and this was him living his ideal self. It's not easy to live your ideal self. Freddie faced challenges in living his abnormality, and people who want to be different to the norm always face challenges. So when I mentioned at the beginning that if you would give some thought as to what your abnormality is that people admire about you, I'd like to kind of think back and think of some of the challenges that you've had, how people have kind of looked at you and said, what do you want to know? What are you doing? What are you taking? You know, and to be yourself, what are the challenges that you have faced? And because it's not easy when you stand out and you want to do something that's extraordinary. I'm not sure if anybody has the courage now to share about their abnormality. Yes, I'm not sure if any comments are coming up in the chat before I go on to what I identify as being the 4 challenges. Okay, I'll move ahead. There are really main challenges for when we want to be different, we want to live our ideal self. One of the first challenges we get is intolerance. And I suppose, let me go back and use myself as an example here again. I mentioned that I was born into a deeply Catholic family in a Catholic country in Ireland, where 94% of the population was Catholic when I was 21 years old. About 4% more were Protestant, and the balance were other religions, Jewish, Islamic, Muslim, etc. You were expected to marry a Catholic girl. And if you married a Protestant girl, the girl had to sign a document to say that she accepted that any children would be brought up as Catholics. Right? So this is the way it was. There was a lack of tolerance. Imagine if I had decided to marry a Muslim. It would have been even more difficult. Or if any of you know the politics in Ireland, if I decided to marry a Protestant, that would have been even more difficult. But it was, you would face immediate alienation from doing something that's out of the norm. You would risk alienation for sure. But things change, social norms do change. So at the beginning of the 20th century in America, there were signs in America, right across America, in restaurants or in workplaces that said that no Irish and no Chinese people need apply. These are actually signs in windows, right? These are social norms. There's lack of tolerance for Irish people. The norm changed. And now 22 of the 45 USA presidents are Irish American. Right? I'm glad to say Donald Trump is not one of them. At one time, if we think even in the role of women in voting, women could not vote. In Ireland, just a few years before I started working, women had to leave work before they were married. When they were married, when they worked, they had to leave work. And that was the intolerance of women in the workplace. And since then, women have changed. Women have come to power in the world. It's still not in a great position. But there have been over 70 women prime ministers and heads of state globally since 1996. So social norms change. But what happens in social norms is that if we don't have an answer to the challenges of what is new, then what is new automatically becomes abnormal. The danger for us with intolerance, when people begin to do things, is that society tends to draw a line in the sand and we begin to build a wall of resistance that is based on ignorance, because we're not curious enough to find out what is abnormality about. And on top of that base of ignorance, we begin to add in distrust. Then on top of distrust, we add in a lot of other materials like fear of the abnormality, rumors about the abnormality, superstitions about the behaviors, fake information being passed around, bigotry, discrimination, hatred. All these things build up around abnormality. Remember that the foundation of the wall starts with ignorance. We often witness many of these things when our clients raise problems in the workplace, and we find that, well, I have from my own experience that a lot of issues have come out from ignorance. Curiosity. Curiosity is a wonderful thing. In the business world, they say that a curious mind indicates a growth mindset. And this is important, obviously, for businesses to grow. But a curious mind for the individual about ourselves is also an opportunity for us to grow, to expand our comfort zones. I remember, if I could share with you, I remember as a child, I don't know how many of you have worked on a farm or have had been in contact with farming, but my father was a mechanic repairing Massey Ferguson tractors, and he used to take me as a kid to the farms, and I loved it. And I remember going one beautiful summer day, we went into a large field, and my father was doing some work on the tractor, and there was a herd of cows in the corner. Beautiful day, sun was shining. I remember it like yesterday. And you have that lush grass. I know Brazilian beef has a reputation as well, so it's grass fed, and same in Ireland. And my father was very good at animals of all sizes, and they followed him everywhere. I remember even chickens would follow him on a farmyard. So in any case, there was about 20 cows in this field, and they're all looking to find the best grass. And my father took up a handful of grass in the field, and he held it towards some of them and called out to them. And so they were eating their own grass, but they looked up at him, and obviously said, my father's grass must be better. And slowly they began to come over to him. And there was a couple in front who were a little bit more brave, and they began to lead, but the others stayed back a little bit. I think, as I'm thinking of it now, I must have been about 7 or 8 years old, because I remember these cows were huge, and I was afraid of them because I was looking up at them and they had horns on their head. I didn't know whether they were cows or bulls. And just as one of them was going to take the grass from my father's hand, I made a small move, and the cow saw it, and she immediately backed away, and all the others backed away a little bit nervously. But one of the cows was not so afraid and came back, and she started to move forward until she could smell the fresh grass. That was the first contact in my father's hand. And then she took it and started munching it. And he leaned down and took out some more grass from the ground. And she was still afraid, but she stayed. And then she took the second grass from my father. And then it was my turn. Now, I could feel her strength. She was a huge cow. And she took the grass from my hand. She chucked it from my hand. And I even managed to touch the gentle animal that was there in front of me. And I scratched her ears. She was lovely. And she licked my hand with big rough tongue. It was, the big eyes were looking at me, and it was, I could see almost gratitude and curiosity in her as well. But her fear was gone, and so was mine, because of the curiosity that she had and that I had. And that day, my own curiosity and that cow's curiosity gave me a wonderful experience and taught me how to overcome my fear in so many circumstances. So when I come across abnormality or something that's strange for me, I have a question. I have a curiosity to know what's going on, what's happening, why is it different? And I ask. And this is one of the areas where when we are abnormal, when we are facing abnormality, it's important to ask those questions. Because sometimes we are a bit like the herd. The last one that stops us from being true to our abnormality is finding the courage to live our ideal lives. We've got many fears of the consequences of bringing out our abnormality, because we're going to change the whole status quo of who we are. Some of them might be if our embracing of our abnormality means that we fail in something, then we lose the security of the normality that we had before. And yet failure is still a path to new learning, but we're afraid to leave it. We fear exclusion and alienation from normal people because we might not be allowed back inside the social loop again, because we've expressed something that is not in the norm, not accepted. So that's the risk. And we don't want that, because the human spirit needs humor and human interaction. So we're trying to hold on to it. We also can fear rejection from family and friends, going back to, for example, if I had married a Muslim in Ireland all the way back in that time, instead of marrying the Muslim that I'm married to now, this time it would have been a different reaction. I might have been alienated. I don't think so, but it's a possibility. We might even risk we might even risk, say, blocking our career path or career development. I'm thinking particularly of when I was looking at years ago when the protests were going on in the States, I was looking at the white people who were out marching and supporting the Black community in America under the Black Lives Matter banner in America, and thinking, will those white people, when they go into the office, face career challenges? Because it does take courage to go and do this. So these are real issues that face us. And if we agree that we are all individual, unique human beings, then isn't it logical that each of us is abnormal in the eyes of someone else? Our social, in summarizing here, our social norms is our rule book. It's where normality lives, and it's where we like to live in normality and peace. What if we encourage abnormality to come up to the existing normality? What would happen to social norms? Well, the effect is that And these are good things, because think of how we've moved away from women having to give up work when they got married, Chinese and Irish not being accepted. How does all that change? It's because abnormality challenges the existing normality. So our comfort zone begins to feel uncomfortable, and that opens space for new learning. That's important. We feel that the foundations of our safety zone have been shaken. And when that safety zone settles again, we might find ourselves with a different mindset. Our brains begin to, the wiring in our brains begin to spark and smoke, and we might come out with some new behaviors that come from this conflict between abnormality and the existing normality. And we might be asked to think differently about something, change our opinion, think creatively. And that's scary, because normality keeps us under control. And our old peace and tranquility is replaced with uncertainty that only gets resolved with the knowledge that we come to from an enlightened place through our curiosity. So when all of this happens to enough of us, then social norms can change. Think of my earlier examples, like I said, women coming into powerful positions. So I've got a couple of questions that come to my mind when I talk about all this, and when I've been mulling over this for quite some time. And what is the role of coaching in social norms? And how is that going to shape the future of your own coaching? And I think it's probably a topic for another day in each of these, but I think it's worth it's worth putting it out there at the moment. Our planet is arguably at the most dangerous position. It includes the threat of extinction. Our own ecosystem might disappear. The threat of global war. There's the continuous opening of new wars, the disasters in Ukraine, the forgotten wars that there are in Africa. When I think of the workplace and the realignment of life values, etc., I think that the role of coaching in the future is extremely important, and particularly when it comes to social norms. And so how is that going to look? And I think this is something that perhaps is going to challenge the ICF in the future. So anybody got any thoughts on that at the moment that you'd like to share?
Eddie, if I can.
Please, yes, thank you, Yassi.
Yassi speaking. Essa é uma questão muito profunda, é uma questão muito importante para nós como sociedade de coaches. Eu me lembro quando eu era profissional de recursos humanos, que eu dizia que ser profissional de recursos humanos não era uma carreira. Ser profissional de recursos humanos era uma missão. E a nossa missão era transformar a vida no mundo corporativo. E agora, eu acho que, sendo coach, a minha missão se expandiu ainda mais, porque não tem mais os limites do mundo corporativo, né? Os limites de nós como coaches, e eu proponho essa reflexão a vocês, graças às provocações do Ed, é provocar uma melhoria na sociedade como um todo. Essa é a nossa missão. E discutimos bastante, Ed e eu, sobre como é que isso se relaciona com a coach position, que é uma das competências que a gente tem que dominar como coaches, não é? E se relaciona perfeitamente bem. Muitos de vocês já compartilharam aqui pensamentos sobre como fazer isso um a um, né? Então, tem o lema da nossa escola é transformar o mundo conversa a conversa, né? Mas nós temos que ter como coaches lá na frente a clareza dessa nossa missão, a clareza da missão de transformação da sociedade, a clareza de missão de transformação do mundo. Nós temos na nossa escola duas missões muito grandes que vão além do coaching, né? Uma missão como comunidade mesmo. A primeira delas foi ligada ao meio ambiente. Como é que e a sustentabilidade, para falar de uma maneira mais ampla. Nós temos uma missão em relação à sustentabilidade do mundo. Nós não podemos ficar passivos, não podemos ficar alheios desse grande desafio, como coaches. E nós temos a missão de transformar o mundo num lugar mais seguro. Se a gente olha para o mundo hoje, a gente vê que muita coisa está errada, né? Então, nós temos essa missão maior. Como é que nós vamos cumprir essa missão? Através do nosso papel de coaches. Eu agradeço muito o Ed ter nos trazido essas reflexões tão amplas e tão profundas que extrapolam o nosso papel profissional, né? Extrapolam bastante o nosso papel profissional. Eu queria compartilhar aqui, Ed, um pouco das nossas conversas na preparação dessa apresentação aqui. Muito obrigada pelo espaço. E eu queria te avisar, Ed, infelizmente o nosso tempo já foi. Então, não sei como é que os dirigentes aqui querem fazer.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah.
I am deeply sorry. I had 3 minutes, but I'm going to. I want to say thank you very much, and my apologies for taking extra time on everybody. My thoughts to you all, my message to you all is when Van Gogh said that normality is a paved road, it's comfortable to walk on, no flowers grow on it. I think that we can work with abnormality and our curiosity as coaches to create a parallel path of awareness that runs alongside the beaten path of that Van Gogh was talking about, the path that other people have laid out for people before, that we as coaches, we can create that parallel path which opens up the possibilities for our coachees for the future. And thank you so much again for your attention. My deep apologies for going over time, and thank you so much for listening to me.
Eu tava na dúvida se eu ia explorar a anormalidade e interromper, e eu fiz o exercício de deixar acontecer e esquecer um pouquinho de tempo. Eu vi que o pessoal estava gostando, eu estava gostando, então obrigado, Ed. Deixamos a anormalidade seguir e a gente foi até onde a gente quis. Queria agradecer a todos vocês que estiveram presentes aqui, né? De novo, agradecer a IMR, Ericsson International, nossa patrocinadora Gold aqui do nosso evento. Agradecer a presença de todos, Ed e a Si. A ICW ainda não acabou, a gente ainda tem mais um evento hoje, né? Dá tempo ainda da gente fazer a inscrição e participar dos Sabores e Saberes da ICW. A gente vai usar esse momento para a gente celebrar, coisa importante para a gente fazer, celebrar e refletir um pouquinho sobre essa semana que foi muito bacana. Novamente, obrigado, Yaci. Thank you, Ed.
Eu é que agradeço. E agradeço a presença de todos e a participação de todos aqui.
Lovely to meet you all.